Hello everybody, this is Squeeva here under the Kraken project, and in this tutorial I will be going over methods. So, like if you recall back to when I was to lesson 1 when I explained what a class and a method is, I said a class is a blueprint and a method is a sketch, and everything in the method is basically the ideas of the sketch, or the more incorrect way, but easier way to imagine it, a class is like a bucket, and a method is like a container, and then everything in the method is stuff that goes into the container. So, creating a method is a lot like creating a whatchamacallit. It is a lot like creating a main method. You have to have it public, which means it can be seen by anything, and static, which means it stays the same, hence the name static. Or yeah, so there's static and final. Final means static means it is more dynamic. Final means it's there. It's not going to change. So public static, and we have to say void, and we're going to call this one here run. And in run, we're just going to output hello. Now, like I said, public means it can be seen by anything. Static means it is dynamic in some sense, but it also means that, or I'm pretty sure it means that it's dynamic, but it also plays into the role of being seen by other classes, because if you take the static out and you try to call it somewhere else, like here, it won't be recognized and it'll give you an error. And so for methods you need public. Now we can just say run, and you can run this, and you see it says hello. Now watch what happens when I take out the static. It gives you an error. And the error says cannot make a static reference to a non-static method. So yeah. So basically, you don't have to have this static if you have this in a constructor, but a constructor is something I'm going to go over when I get into classes. So yeah, and static references can only be made in static classes, and non-static references can only be made in non-static areas. So let's move on, and there's another type of method you can have. You can have a public static int hello, and here it's going to give you an error if you do not do something called return say 1. And this is just basically going to output 1. So if we go ahead and run hello after run, the result we should get, alright, okay. We should be able to get that. Now, you'd only use things like these if you want to do a getter and a setter, or not if you want to do a getter. This is how you would go about doing that. You just return 1. So anyways, now that I've done that, and you can do this with almost any data type. I don't know if you can do it with a Boolean. Actually, I'm pretty sure you can do it with a Boolean, but you need to return a Boolean. We can do this with a float. You can do this with anything really, but I'm just going to stick with int. You can even do it with a string. You can even have a public string, and you'd have to just change that. So you can have really any data type there. So the next thing I'm going to go over is global variables. Now, a global variable is declared a lot like a lot like a method, and only instead of having void, you'd have int a is equal to say 0, and you'd have the data type. It's basically declaring a data type with this in front of it. Now, public means it can be seen by the entire class, and static means it's dynamic in some sense. You can look that up, and you can call me on that if it's wrong, but I'm fairly confident that that's what it is. Now, okay, so you can also have so with a public static int, you can just say a. You can just call up a, or you can do this dot a. But this can only be done in a non-static. You can only do int, or you can only do this in a non-static thing. So now I'm going to get to private variables and getters and setters. So I'm going to quickly go over what a getter is. So if we have a private int, right? Private. Now, private is something you should use for almost any global variable. Private means that not anyone can just get in and change it. Public means anyone can change it. And I don't mean that physically, I mean digitally, like the computer can't go in and change it. So what we do is we'd have public void set a, and in here we'd have an int a, for example. Now, if it's within the parameters of a class, you do not need to, it doesn't matter if it's the same name as this, but the way you would let the compiler differentiate between, the way you let the compiler differentiate between this variable and this variable is you say this dot a is equal to a, and you see that works. So now what we need to do is we need to say public int set a, or not set a, I'm sorry, get a, and in here we're just going to say return this dot a. So now if we set int, so if we just do, if we set a equal to set a, and then in here we're just going to say 20. It should give you, oh, okay, return a, and then you can't make a non-static reference right now. And then that should give you errors here. Can I make an, wait a second. Oh, hold on. Okay, so I just realized what my problem is, and that is that I'm jumping too far ahead of myself. So I'm just going to quickly go into what a constructor is, because that's obviously what's needed. So a constructor is basically a non-static method. You can look at it like that. It's like it's very hard to explain. It's like something that contains information. So we're gonna call it, and it has to be the same name as the class. So it's like, I usually image it as a subclass, but that's not really what it is. And here we can just do set a to 20, and then we are going to have, and we're going to say we're just going to get a, and here we can just run new the sound of methods, and if we run that, it returns 20. And that is basically how a getter and setter works. So that is all for this tutorial. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please go to www.andyphillips.org or .org, I'm sorry, and then go to Java and look and complete the practice problem. So again, thank you for watching, and adios.